What's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of At a Glance, a series in which I give you an appetizer, sample, or glimpse into a particular faction in 40k. The goal behind it is to help you decide if you want to look further into that force on your own, or maybe even start collecting that force as well. So up on the chopping block this time is going to be a redo. This is going to be the Deathwatch Space Marines. I talked about them in the past, but with 8th edition, it's time to redo everything. And they're a cool force to talk about because they're a very unique Space Marine force. Pretty much the other Space Marine codices we have are for chapters, right? The Space Marine Codex has Ultramarines, Imperial Fists, and so on there. Grey Knights are a Astartes chapter. They're a full-blown chapter, and the Chamber Militant of the Ordo Malleus. You have the Space Wolves, the Blood Angels, and the Dark Angels, and whatever. The Deathwatch is not a chapter in the way you think. It's not really a chapter at all. It's a collection of Astartes from a multitude of different chapters under one roof, temporarily for the most part. This is because the Ordo Xenos, the alien hunters, have made an arrangement with a lot of Space Marine chapters. And the arrangement is you loan to us your warriors, your full-fledged battle brothers, a few at a time, not a whole lot in any one go, but you loan them to us. And in return, should they survive, you gain a good amount of information and intel and tactics. They're going to come back to the chapter with all this specialized alien hunter training that they can then disseminate amongst the rest of their chapter once they're debriefed and everything. So it is a mutually beneficial relationship. It's a bit more riskier to the parent chapters, but they do gain a lot of intel, not just on how to fight the Xenos, but also on different chapters, maybe even potentially mending relationships as a byproduct, or hurting relationships potentially as well, right? But my point is, it's a beneficial thing for both sides. There's a reason these chapters do this. So it's a very interesting setup. And by and large, like I mentioned, it's a temporary thing. Some watch commanders and watch captains stay on longer because they are leadership amongst the Deathwatch kill teams for the Ordo Xenos. And there are even fewer special scenarios of permanent Astartes in the Deathwatch. These are known as Black Shields. This is where the term Black Shield actually started, is in the Deathwatch lore, if you will, before the Horus Heresy stuff adopted the term for a similar concept. So Black Shields in Deathwatch are Space Marines with no chapter affiliation. Maybe their chapter was destroyed. Maybe they were exiled from their chapter, and to do a permanent penance crusade on their own with their gear, and that's it. Maybe they've left a chapter that they felt was falling to corruption. Whatever the case is, aside from screening them to make sure they're not tainted or anything like that, really, the Ordo Xenos don't ask too many questions. Having a permanent Deathwatch kill team member, a permanent Deathwatch Astartes, basically, is such a valuable resource, so valuable that they just accept it. They just take them in, screen them for taintedness, if you will, take them in, and they stay forever. So very rare, but it does happen. So with that said, having all these different chapters fighting under one roof, you still need some uniformity to all this. So being a very specialized spec oppy style of force, the Deathwatch Astartes have adopted, or temporarily adopt, different colorings while they're amongst the Deathwatch. And it's predominantly black armor. It's predominantly black armor with a left arm of silver with a special Deathwatch shoulder pad. I believe the lore behind the arm being silver is to appease the machine spirit for changing up the colorings and all that. And then their right shoulder pad inset, typically, but the whole right shoulder pad is given over to their original chapter colors to honor their chapter still. And that's where the chapter symbol goes as well, on the right shoulder pad. Their weapons are red, kind of like a violet tinged red, and the helmet lenses are red or yellow typically. It's a very sharp looking force. Looks very specialist, looks very clean and intimidating. Black armor is very easy to do that with. But on top of that, you still get to keep your chapter trappings. So if you have a Dark Angel Deathwatch member with robes, he still has his robes on. So he has the whole Deathwatch color scheme going on with robes. Space Wolves can still have the armor with the runic symbols carved in and still have their wolf pelts, but it's black armor. And so on and so forth down the line. So there is still stuff that is unique identifiers to their particular chapter going on, which is neat. So that's their look. Very sharp. It extends to their dreadnoughts. Their dreadnought left arm is also silver. Their vehicles tend to be black with red accenting. So, really looking good. Primaris follow the same deal. So how do we represent these guys? Well, since 7th edition, so the previous edition was the first time we got a full-fledged Deathwatch Codex. Deathwatch Space Marine Codex for the Ordo Xenos Deathwatch Kill Team stuff, right? This is the Codex for Deathwatch Space Marines, and this is the way to play them, especially in 8th now. See, real quick, back in 7th edition, 6th, and 5th, basically whenever Stern Guard first came out, which is 5th edition, really, we've had the ability to just utilize a Space Marine Codex, typically, if that's what you're using for your force, take a Stern Guard squad and just paint them up and build them like a Deathwatch Kill Team squad to look the part, because they used to have special issue ammunition. Before that, in 4th, we had a special PDF for Deathwatch. Here in 8th, Stern Guard have lost their special issue ammunition in place of getting a special issued bolter, which is still very cool, but doesn't have the same feel. So that old concept of using a Stern Guard squad to just look like Deathwatch doesn't work quite as well anymore. So really the definitive way to play them is the Deathwatch Codex. Either as allies or as your main and / only force, the Deathwatch Codex is very capable in any of those scenarios. And it's a very cool codex. This is where you get your mixed units for Space Marines. And yes, Primaris, being an 8th edition thing, Deathwatch have Primaris in their 8th edition codex, and they too have the capability of having a mixed unit Primaris force, which is unique amongst Deathwatch, to my understanding still. So you would have a core of intercessors, followed by the ability to add Rivers, Hellblasters, and the like to that. So it's a very cool bit of stuff you can do there in the Deathwatch Codex. Unfortunately, they didn't really go too specialist style. I was hoping they could at very least take the flyer transport that the Deathwatch have. I was hoping Primaris could take that, and they cannot. Still very limited in that regard, but it's a step in the right direction. It's still a very cool codex. It gives off a very special, forces style of feel with their mixed squad capabilities, just some of the war gear they have, plus the special issue ammunition, and even their own bits look really cool for that form as well. So very cool codex, and the way to represent Deathwatch, of course, 100% proper is with their codex, and there's really no workarounds that feel that viable anymore because of the changes to Stern Guard and those other codices. So there you go. So the Deathwatch Codex is the way to go with them, and when it comes to collecting them, being Space Marines, we actually have a lot of cool options here because we have the standard Deathwatch kit. So we have this Deathwatch Space Marine Kill Team kit, which is kind of your generic Deathwatch kit. That's where their unique bits are to make a very generic Deathwatch squad with different chapters, of course, in there and so forth with the right shoulder pad. But we also have Kill Team Cassius. This is from a box game, but you can buy the Kill Team on its own. And this has, a Terminator and a Biker and a Jump Pack guy in there, sure, because mixed squad yet again. But it's still a very cool squad to just buy and have, in your Deathwatch force, whether as a squad by itself or just divvy them up. The different models, they look really cool. So that's a nice bit of stuff there. There's the Deathwatch Terminator Captain, the Deathwatch Primaris Apothecary, and the Deathwatch Primaris Intercessors. All these things are said blister kit or squad with the Deathwatch upgrade frame, which is purchasable by itself. So, well, yes, of course you could do that. You could also buy Watch Captain Artemis on his own, which is cool because he's a special character in the Codex, so that's cool. But you can get the Deathwatch kit stuff, all hunky-dory and nice. But you can also buy the Deathwatch upgrade frame on its own. And this upgrade frame has stuff in there for both normal Space Marines and Primaris. Remember, most of the shoulder pad and helmet stuff is interchangeable between Primaris stuff and Space Marine stuff, so that works out well. Plus some unique Space Marine bits such as torso front and a power sword hand for standard Space Marines, and even some Intercessor and not Intercessor, Inceptor and Aggressor shoulder pads are in there as well, which I imagine can function on Terminators too. I haven't tried, but I imagine they can based on the look. But anyways, so you can get that upgrade frame and then buy Hellblasters, or then buy, Stern Guard or Vanguard or Devastators, and that way have some really cool looking stuff. So you can have a Kill Team kit, Kill Team Cassius kit, and then Stern Guard or Devastators with the Deathwatch upgrade frame, and you have a lot of really sharp looking Deathwatch models because of how universal the standard Astartes kits are with each other, which is very nice. With that said, when it comes to painting them, it's very straightforward for the black armor, for the silver arm, even doing the red and the weapons and all that. The shoulder pad on the right side, the right shoulder pad, which is chapter, color, and symbol, is where you get to have some fun. So, for example, Salamanders, their shoulder pad inset is black. So what you can do there is take their shoulder pad trim, as we see, I believe, done in one of the models for the Deathwatch stuff. We see it done there, and what you can do is take shoulder pad trim and put the Salamander green on the shoulder pad trim to help further convey you're looking at a Salamander. You could also do that with some other part of the model, maybe a knee pad or an extra bit somewhere. It could be done in the green to help convey it too if you wanted to. But just some food for thought that way. You can do the same thing with Ultramarines, Crimson Fist, whatever. You can do the full shoulder pad, not just the inset. Or you could do just a shoulder pad inset and then do a silver or black trim around that. Now, what's really fun with painting Deathwatch in this way is you get to experiment, right? So let's say you want to do an Imperial Fist. Well, it's just a shoulder pad for that color. So if yellow is something you're intimidated by or leery of, it's just one shoulder pad inset. You get to really experiment with how you would like to achieve yellow in that particular shade of yellow in a very small bit section. And if you're a little messy in doing so, you can clean it up very easily with a silver or black shoulder pad trim and be just fine. So it lets you kind of do some minor stretching in the colors you wouldn't typically do because you don't feel comfortable doing them full force or whatever, but it lets you get a little bit of experience under your belt and how you would do it in the form of the shoulder pad inset. So that's pretty cool. Anyways, that's really it for the Deathwatch Space Marines. A very cool codex. I like it. I like it for its potential of using it as a count size codex for stuff for like my DIY force concept, but that's beyond the scope of this at a glance. A cool codex, a cool force, and I'm hoping that if we see future updates to codices, maybe in the form of like version 2 or a 9th edition or whatever, we see even more interesting stuff in the form of Primaris and Astarte stuff. Maybe not mixing together, but maybe Primaris taking other alternative transportation that isn't specifically for them would be interesting in the next edition of Deathwatch whenever that happens. Anyway, that's it. Thanks very much for sticking through it. What are your thoughts on the Deathwatch Codex? Do you like them? Do you not? Share it. It's all good. Anyways, any other questions, comments, or requests, leave them in the comment section. And until next time, take it easy.